Hi everyone, so in this video I'm going to be talking about my work experience at Penguin Random House, which I completed just before Christmas last year. So I spent 2 weeks in the marketing and publicity department of Penguin General in London. So firstly I'll mention the application process. Applications open every few months for a time period slightly later in that year, and it's quite a unique application process in that you don't submit a CV or a cover letter, but instead you answer a few more general questions about your reading habits and why you've applied. But the people who are chosen to do the work experience are done so on a random basis, not based on any of these questions. This is done presumably to make it more fair and more open to those who would not normally get the opportunity to do this type of work experience. So my only advice would be just be persistent in applying. If you've done so in the past and you haven't got it, just keep applying. Your chances don't necessarily increase, but the more you do it, the more likely you are to eventually get it. This was my third time applying for work experience. I have done so twice in the past, so I finally got it my third time lucky. Applications aren't open right now as I'm filming this in January 2018, but I will link the website in the description of this video so that you can bookmark it and come back when it is available again. When you make the application, you will get the option to say which dates you're available, and I would just say try and be as flexible as you possibly can, because then you'll be more likely to be accepted. And you also get the opportunity to say which imprint or department you have a preference for working at. And again, I would say just go for everything. I just said I would be happy working in any department because I think the experience will be equally valuable no matter where you're placed. And you can always go to other departments and have a chat and find out how they work there. You're not in an enclosed sort of pen only working with your people. So as I just said, I was at Penguin General, which publishes mostly literary fiction and non-fiction, and they publish some really big names like Ali Smith, Arundhati Roy, Mohsin Hamid, Zadie Smith, and in the past they've published very famous authors like George Orwell and Gabriel Garcia Marquez. So I was really pleased to be placed in this imprint because it has a lot of my favourite authors that they've published, and the types of books they publish really align with my own interests. Another thing that I think is really worth mentioning is the fact that this is paid work experience, which in my experience is very unusual in publishing. I have done a lot of different work experience placements and sort of informal things, and they're never really paid. Sometimes you'll get a little bit of money for travel or your lunch, but this is, they pay the national living wage, which amounts to around £240 per week that you're there, which for me managed to cover my travel expenses because I am from Edinburgh, so I was travelling down to London and staying there for 2 weeks. It covered my accommodation. I stayed at an Airbnb, and it did cover my sort of living expenses for those 2 weeks. So while I didn't realistically make money from this experience, it didn't cost anything for me, which I was really appreciative for. So the setup, at least in the department that I was in, was that there's always 2 work experience candidates and they start on alternate weeks. So the person that was there the week before you will sort of teach you the ropes and how to do the sort of basic tasks that are expected of you. And then in your second week, you'll be teaching the new person. So I thought it was a good system. It gave you someone to talk to who was on the same kind of footing as you, but it also means that you have a little bit less contact with the people, the actual employees in your team. So firstly, I'll talk a little bit about the actual tasks that I completed while I was there, and then more about what I gained from it and what I thought about the experience overall. So in marketing and publicity, there is a lot of manual and fairly menial tasks that have to be completed, particularly in publicity, which involves sending out a lot of review and proof copies of books to newspapers and celebrities, influencers or other authors. So this is often the kind of jobs that the work experience candidate will be asked to do. So I spent a lot of time packing up and posting lots of books out to people, and although it's not immensely challenging, it doesn't require a lot of brain power, I did still find it really interesting because I got to see what campaigns that they were really working on for the 2018 season, and also just the types of people that they were sending those books out to. There were other sort of more admin tasks that I completed, including finding contact addresses for people, using Excel spreadsheets to make labels, and also using a program called Biblio, which is used by a lot of publishers to store metadata for their titles, which sounds very dry, and it is a little bit, but it's actually a really useful skill to have, to say that you have experience using that program, because it's certainly not just Penguin that uses it. Another aspect of publicity and marketing is collecting reviews of books that have been published in newspapers and magazines. They like to collate all these mentions and reviews and recommendations and manually sort of put them into folders for each of the books so they can keep track of where the book's being talked about in the press. So again, that was a task that I spent quite a lot of time doing. A couple of the more substantial and exciting tasks that I got to work on while I was there was creating marketing material for Zadie Smith's new book called Feel Free, which comes out in February, and it meant that I got to read the book like a few months before it comes out, which to me is extremely exciting. I also got to make a press release for a book that's coming out this year, which was really interesting. It was quite a straightforward task because I got to model it on another one, but it still taught me really useful skills, and you know, it is quite a fulfilling thing to make something that is then going to be sent out to a lot of people with the book that will give them information about it. So those are some of the tasks that I did while I was there, and they were very varied, and not all of them were particularly challenging, but I think this is kind of reflective of what the job is often like in publishing, especially at an assistant level, which is kind of the sort of role that I was taking on while I was there. It's not all creative work. There is a lot of admin and a lot of manual work to be done, as I said, particularly in publicity. So it is kind of reflective of what you would be doing when you actually worked there, which was really not a problem for me at all. And also the time of year I was there, it was the 2 weeks right before Christmas, so the office was emptying out by my last week, and they weren't really launching any new campaigns, so it was a little bit quieter than usual. What I found most useful being there was actually just being in that office environment and around the people who are doing this job and working in the industry that I would really like to break into, because for me anyway, the environment that I'll be working in is as important as the job I'll be doing, and I want to know that I feel like this is the type of place I would be happy and comfortable working in. I've done some work with really, really small publishing companies in Scotland, but I've never been somewhere that's nearly as big as Penguin. So again, it's really interesting comparing the kind of working dynamic between really small places and much, much bigger ones, and sort of seeing how the bureaucracy works in places like Penguin. Because again, this is a choice that I will have to make, and I'm sure if you're interested in doing work experience, it's a choice you'll make as well, is whether you would prefer to work in a small publisher that maybe has more autonomy, or in a bigger one like Penguin that is maybe more restricted and has more sort of levels of bureaucracy, but they get to publish Ali Smith. I think you can be taught about the types of tasks that you'll be expected to do when you work in publishing, but it's not until you manage to do work experience that you see firsthand what that atmosphere and environment is like to actually work in. And I thought, I really enjoyed it. The people were really friendly. I felt like I could ask questions if I was unsure. It was a very communicative and collaborative department, particularly marketing and publicity, which involves a lot of collaboration between the different members of the team. And for me, it really reaffirmed that it is the type of environment that I would like to work in. And I'm not really sure if marketing and publicity is going to be the department that I will be applying for jobs in. I have a bit more experience in editorial, so maybe a placement in that department would have been more sort of up my street. But I wouldn't be deterred from applying for departments that wouldn't be your first choice, because I still got to speak to people who are in the editorial department. I chatted to someone who was an editorial assistant who told me about their responsibility and role, And it is, I think, really invaluable to have that direct conversation with someone who's working in that publisher, doing that job, because it's always going to be much more authentic coming from them. Another quite large benefit was the Pulp Shelf, which is a shelf in Penguin offices that has a lot of books from different departments that are no longer needed, and they're there because they will be pulped if they're not taken by employees. And for employees and work experience candidates, you're told you can take up to 2 each day that you're there. And actually, while I was there, they were doing massive clear outs, so I was basically told, please take as many as you would like. So I ended up coming home with a fair few free books, which is a pretty massive perk. So I have a few tips to give you, and they're all fairly obvious ones, but they were quite helpful to me. I would say firstly, try not to worry before you go in. I know you might not have done sort of work experience placements before, or even if you have, it's always a new environment with lots of new people. It can be quite daunting, but they will all be really nice to you and really welcoming. They don't have massive expectations of your skill or experience level. And if you're unsure of something, as I definitely was at times, just ask. They will be much happier to help you than if you were to sit there and just not do anything. And talking of not doing anything, there will be times, or there certainly were with me, where I didn't have anything specifically to do. I was waiting for emails from different members of the team with tasks, and sometimes there was a lapse, you know, for periods at a time. But I would just say always just go and ask your supervisor if there's anything you can help with, rather than sitting and not doing anything. Sometimes there's not all that much you can really do, but I think the most important thing is the attitude you bring to it. And if you show that you're enthusiastic and you're happy to help and you're willing to ask questions, they will really appreciate that. Overall, I found it a really valuable experience. Genuinely, I really enjoyed doing it. I felt like I have a better understanding now of the types of roles that people have within marketing and publicity departments, and the different imprints of Penguin, what the sort of, again, the working environment is like, and just, yeah, what's expected of you if you were to work there. I think it depends what your expectations are when you're going into this work experience, because certainly, you know, from what I did, there was not a lot that was extremely difficult or required a huge amount of creativity. And if you are maybe studying marketing, you might not be able to implement, you know, many of the things that you've learned while you're doing the placement, although you might if you're studying marketing. But you will get to do things that are authentic to the work that they actually do, and you will genuinely be able to help them quite a lot in the campaigns that they are working on. I'm really grateful for the chance to do this work experience, and I would really recommend it to anyone who's interested in publishing, because you might, even if you hate it, it's something to rule out. And I've done work experience before where I have really not enjoyed the experience, but it's always been really helpful in teaching me what it is that I want from my career. So I'd still recommend you apply, and especially because it's paid. I've really not experienced that before, so it makes a big difference. My camera cut out at the end here, but all I wanted to say was, if you have done this experience yourself, then please let me know. I'd love to hear what your experiences were. But either way, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.